Hello student, in this unit we will study India's external relation with the countries and how India remains out of the two blocs during the Cold War and was the situation during the Indo-Pakistan and India-China war India witnessed. So these are the issues we are going to discuss in this unit. So let's begin with the topic. We all know that after the decolonization a lot of issue was started, like poverty issue of democratization of the country, and the next thing that came at that time was how India is going to formulate its foreign policy and what is going to be the India's foreign policy. So India adopted for a sovereign and independent foreign policy. Even the directive principle of India or preamble of India reflects that India's ideology and India's foreign policy objective. So these are the things that guided the India's foreign policy during the early phase of 1950s and 60s. So let's begin with this. The first thing that started the policy of non-alignment movement. What is that? After the independence, as I mentioned, a lot of issue, and Jawaharlal Nehru do not wanted to lose its sovereignty. He wanted an independent foreign policy that not going to be aligned by the any group. So this leads to the this led to the implementation of non-alignment policy. During the Cold War, two blocs were created, and Nehru do not wanted to be aligned with any of these two group. So this policy of non-alignment movement came from these origination. And the second thing is seeking for global peace, because a newly independent country do not wanted to indulge in a costly and proxy war where you are going for a war just because some of the other country in the bloc having some sort of dispute with some country. So this is also one of the reason that India do not wanted to go with any of these two blocs. India remained out of these two region and advocated for a global peace and a peaceful existence. And India's ideology even before the independence also reflected in its foreign policy and non-alignment. So all these things led to the policy of non-alignment. Now let's come to the next slide. The role of Nehru in international relation. Whenever we talk about India's foreign policy, we cannot do it without the mentioning name of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, because Nehru was the first prime minister of the country and he was also foreign minister during that period. And during 1946 to 1964 he played a very important role in India's foreign policy, and a lot of new laws and a new platform were created just to advocate and just to preserve the India's sovereignty during that period. So as a national leader, there was three agenda of the Jawaharlal Nehru. And what was that? First thing is to preserve the hard-earned sovereignty. What does it mean? Hard-earned sovereignty means after that long freedom fight or freedom struggle, we want to hold sovereignty in our own hand and not want it to be shared with some other countries or not going to be influenced by the other big power. So this is the first thing. And the second thing, he wanted to protect the territorial integrity. Territorial integrity means that India is not going to be sacrifice its territory or borders to others country. This was the second thing in front of Jawaharlal Nehru. And the third is promotion of the rapid economic development, because without the economical development we cannot do about two things, like the preservation of sovereignty or territorial integrity needs economical firm structure, because without a firm or strong economy a country cannot sustain for a long period of time. So this is also one of the reason. And these three bullets ideology or these three agenda of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru continuously reflected in its foreign policy or his economic policy, because the 5-year plans were also a reflection of these things. So these are the things that Nehru formulated at that time. And as a champion of decolonization, Nehru advocated for the decolonization of all the African countries that were still fighting for decolonization. And this decolonization also led to the fostering of pan-Asianism, because Nehru was very agitation. Nehru promoted the cooperation with the other Asian countries also, because at that time there was two bloc, and both these two are European power. Either USSA and USSR, these two faction, and Nehru did not wanted to indulge in these things. So he called for a Asia unity or pan-Asianism. This also one of the reasons that later led to the success of non-alignment movement in early age. So these things were started at that time. Now let's come to the next slide. Distance from the two blocks in Cold War. So as I mentioned in earlier slides also, he refused to align, because he do not want us to join any of these two blocs. One bloc is the UN led bloc, that is called we know today as NATO, North Atlantic Organization, and the second led by the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact was exist. So he did not wanted to join any of these two. This non-alignment was one of the reason for coming of the name agency. And later on, when Britain attacked Egypt over the Suez Canal issue, so India came on the forefront, and it criticized, and it started a protest against the Britain government. So it also reflects the India's independent foreign policy, and reflects that India is going to be not going to be suppressed or not going to be quiet if something happened on an international platform. So it was also reflected in that. But later on, one interesting thing is that when USSR attacked Hungary, there was no public condemnation by the India. So it's also questioned India's independent foreign policy, and how India is regulating its foreign policy, and what are the goals of India's in international arena. So this thing was also started. And as a newly independent country, India not going to align, or not ready to align with any of these two blocks. On other hand, Pakistan joined the USA bloc. So Pakistan joining of the USA bloc also created a pressure on India, that India is not joining, and it's also lists the derogation, or we can say a low phase of India's US relation was started at that time. And later in India Pakistan war, it's also reflected that USA openly supported Pakistan. And to some extent we can say that in early phase, not China but USA who sponsored Pakistan for India's war, for a war against India. So it was also an issue, we need to look into that. And the second thing is navigating the divide. So what India pursued the policy of neutrality, that balancing the relation. It's not going to be taking the one side on some issue, or going to be that no, this block is right or that block is right. So it's trying to create a balance between these two also. That later on was very successful, that India has created a independent relation with both USSA and USSR. Even today we seeing that India has a firm relation with USSA one hand, and other hand also we had a relation with Russia also, because Russia really helped India in developing a lot of things in nuclear weapons, or for imports of military equipments. So USSR helped a lot during that period also. And in today world we can say India and USA, a lot of thing we started together. India and USA are working on quantum things also. So these growth, or these firm relation of today has a very early past investment. So we can say we can see these thing in that sense also. And the third is the independent voice. So with the decision that we as an Indian, or we India not going to join these two blocks, it also shows the India's independent voice, that although we are newly independent, we had a lot of issue, but it doesn't mean that we are going to join some group, or we are we are live in comfort. So this is also created this led to a message to the whole world that India had a independent voice at that time. Even some of the leader from the opposition party also says that we should go to the USA because it's a pro democracy. But some of the party, because India also if impact of communism ideology or communist ideology, to some are going towards the USSR, we should go to the USSR. So even Bahujan Samaj Party was advocating pro US policy that time, but Nehru not chosen either of these two, and he came with his independent voice during this period. So this thing reflects the India's independent voice, we can say. Now let's come to the next slide. Afro-Asian unity. What do you mean by Afro-Asian unity? Most of these Afro-African or Asian countries independent after 1940s or 1950, even some of the African countries it was decolonized in 1970s also. So or most of these Asian and African country was colonized by the European power. So these two Asian and African countries had a past experience had a mutual past experience of European exploitation or European colonial exploitation. So this is also led to mutual understanding of both these unions, and led a creation or led a contact between or led an international relation between African or Asian countries. And in this thing also Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru played a very important role. He created a platform also. The Africa Asian Conference was held in Indonesia at the time, called a place city Bandung in 1955, and that led to the Bandung Conference during this period. So this platform created a for India and Asian countries or other African countries for economic cooperation or cultural exchange or an ideological diplomatic relation creation. So this created a base of the firm African and Asian unity in further upcoming decades. In today, where India's called itself as a leader of South, so what does it mean? That we are talk about those region or those countries that are not very much developed or called in the least developed countries or developing countries. So India talk for cause of these regions. So this all things started from this Afro-Asian unity, we can say to some extent. And this Bandung conference that happened in 1955 also one of the reason for the successful establishment of non-alignment movement in 1961. So these things we also need to keep in mind, this how this one platform led to the successful creation or successful ideological establishment of another platform. So this is how this Asian unity was created, and our shared value, because we had a common experience. We have these things also created some sort of bedrock unity, and it's led to the, because we both have mostly same sort of issue, like we had an issue of undevelopment. We all witness the cause of colonizations, or a sort of social justice issue was also started. So we had a very shared value or shared issues. This also one of the reason for the successful uh, creation of this platform during the early phase. Now let's come to the next thing. What is this peace and conflicts with China? So this is one of the very important issue in this slide, peace and conflict with China. India and China had a very smooth relation. When India is independent, we had no much issue like Pakistan. So India and China, we shared history of Buddhism and culture also. So we had not very complex relation. But with the time period, with the later on as time passes, it's created a very complex relation that reflects today. We cannot imagine today a very good relation or a very good cooperation, or we cannot expect any good from China today. But this was not a seen in early phase or during 1948 or 1949. Because even one thing that when China revolution was started under the Mao Zedong in 1949 and declared its independent, India was one of the country that accepted China communist as a communist China government as a country, and some of the other country, even USSR, not accepted China during that period. So we had a very good relation during the early phase during that time. Nehru later on, when China as an independent government established a communist government after 1949, some of the colleagues of Jawaharlal Nehru, one name is Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, said that the China can create a danger in near future. But Nehru said that it was exceeding and unlikely to be happen that India will face an attack from the China. So he was very was very positive. He has a very pacific attitude towards the China, that there was no any bad things going to be happen with China. Even with the border area during that period, there was a paramilitary forces and not Indian army guarding the border. So you can say that how Nehru was thinking at the time, that India and China had no such issue. Even later on, when these things change, even today in parliamentary session, opposition party, when China issue came, they used to target Nehru on that because of his miscalculation or his extreme positive attitude toward China created such issue in today's territorial area or today's Indian China relation. So this was the issue. Later on, we see that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and Zhou Enlai in 1954 created a five principle, or very famously known as the Panchsheel, and one that we both of the country, the agreement includes that we both country respect territorial integrity, culture, and non-interference policy we will adopt with each other. So these goody things was mentioned during that period, and it's led to the Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. One of the concepts was also started during that period. But these things was extremely changed after 1950s, because a lot of new issue was started and relation became, these two was strained. First, how it is started, first when China annexed Tibet in 1950. So this was the turning point of India and China relation. Even though India not criticized or any reaction given for the China annexation of Tibet, but Dalai Lama, a spiritual guru who taken political asylum in India, and this asylum of Dalai Lama in India, China seeing it as an anti-China activity. So so this is also started a lowing period of lowing phase of India and China relation. And after that, a border dispute, we all know, we had a lot of border dispute with China. So what is a border dispute? Two most important region with the border dispute is Aksai Chin, one of the region in Ladakh today, and the second one is Arunachal Pradesh. At the time, it was called Northeast Frontier Agency. So these two region was a problematic region or a disputed region between both of the two, because China not going to be accept, and China clearly said that it's not going to be accept any colonial agreement over the border area. So these led a series of war and conflicts, and even today a lot of proxy wars and a lot of issues going with China on these Arunachal Pradesh issue. So these things were started at the time in 1962 October. China attacked both these disputed region, and it's also occupied some of the key areas in Arunachal Pradesh. So this sudden attack, India was not prepared for this attack. So this created a danger for India's territory and external security. And the second attack in the western front of Ladakh, Indian army able to stop these forces in Ladakh region, western front Aksai Chin area. But the Arunachal Pradesh area was occupied by the Chinese army during that period. And later on, a unilateral ceasefire was happened and troops were withdrawn from these region. So these 1962 war to 1962 war was not only a damage on territorial area, but it also created, or you can say somewhere it's dented the India's image in international platform, because this was not just a territorial loss, it's also a loss for India image, because as a newly independent country we are not able to guard our territory from our neighboring countries. And even Soviet Union was neutral at that time, and no comments or no cooperation came from the Soviet Union, and a national humiliation India witnessed during this period. You can just understand these things, that how the humiliation was so large that some of the top commanders, either in the army, either they resigned or retired from the army during that period. Nehru defense minister VK Menon was also leave ministry, and even Nehru image was also questioned and dented at that time, and a lot of opposition party calling that Nehru has a lack military preparedness, that's led to the loss of war. So these things was started. Even these impacted parliamentary propagation also. First non confidence motion in government was also started at that time, and Congress lost some of the key election to the Lok Sabha after the India-China War of 1962. So these are the things that impacted a large number of things in India. Some of the opposition party, one is the CPI, Communist Party of India. Also a lot of issues started in the party itself. CPI with the USSR pro party called CPI remain, but some of the party with had China pro ideology, CPIM was created at the time, and some of the leaders of CPIM was also arrested during the Indo-China war also. So these CPIM leader were arrested at that time. So this war also impacted the opposition parties. And the one other thing is that the northeast state was very much affected after the Indo-China war, because these northeast state impact was so large that the reorganization was started after the Indo-China war. Nagaland granted the statehood identity, and Manipur, Tripura state of northeast granted the right to have their own legislative assembly. So these changes were started after the Indo-China war. Even today we say that Arunachal Pradesh is still facing the issue of China aggression, because some of the pockets area of Arunachal Pradesh were a shared border with China, creating small pockets of villages at there by the Chinese government. So this is creating such a very high issue, a very big issue on the India security. And China openly claims that whosoever who the citizen of Arunachal Pradesh was a citizen of China. They are not declaring, or they are not saying any discrimination between the Arunachal Pradesh person and the China. Even some of the person, if let's say one you or me, one person, if let's say one person belongs to Arunachal Pradesh going to China, so they don't stamp on their passport. They say this person belongs to our own country, so why we need this sort of visa or these things. So they stamp on different page or something. They don't stamp on their passport a person who's coming from the Arunachal Pradesh. So this treatment of China with the Arunachal area was a very much issue today. Arunachal Pradesh created or China aggression in Arunachal Pradesh creating one of the topmost security issue in India's security externally and internally also, we can say. So this is how India and China relations started with a good quote of Hindi Chini bhai bhai, but now it's turning towards a lot of war issue and a lot of dispute issue that not coming or not going to solve, and there was a no future. We are looking forward that how we will solve this territorial issue. So these are the things with India and China conflict and peace. Now let's come to the next slide. The China invasion 1962. This already I told how this started and what happened. War and peace with Pakistan. This topic. We all know we had no very good issue with Pakistan since independence in 1947. That's why India and Pakistan were partitioned in two different nations. And Pakistan issue, even in 1947 itself, a lot of proxy war was started during that time period. But it's not led to the war. Kashmir issue led to went to the UN, but the UN not able to solve the Kashmir issue. It's remained the same after the long years of independence. And the second thing is the water dispute. The water dispute over the Indus River. So Indus River with the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Satluj tributary were distributed between India and Pakistan with the help of World Bank. World Bank came into rescue, and India and Pakistan signed a successful Indus Water Treaty with both these countries. And the next thing is Tashkent Agreement. What is Tashkent Agreement? We will study in further also, or in Lal Bahadur Shastri we studied how this happened and what was the thing in Tashkent Agreement. Tashkent Agreement was happened in the Uzbekistan Tashkent with the mediation of Soviet Union. Lal Bahadur Shastri and Pakistan Prime Minister Mr. Ayub Khan was signed after the war period. So this agreement was signed in Uzbekistan Tashkent area. The Kargil confrontation, India and Pakistan had very complex relation, and India Pakistan war, even during Lal Bahadur Shastri region, Pakistan attacked in 1965 from the run of Kutch area, and believed that the local population will support Pakistan, but it not happened sadly. And counter to this, Lal Bahadur Shastri orders Indian troop to launch a counter offensive on the Punjab border. So this led to a fiery battle between the army and Indian army reached to the Lahore. And so for the and now for that matter, United Nations intervened in this issue and in this hostility. So later on, this Tashkent Agreement happened with the Lal Bahadur Shastri and Pakistan Prime Minister Ayub Khan. I already mentioned. Now let's come to the next slide. What is Bangladesh War of Independence 1971? So Bangladesh War of Independence was a liberation war with the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman from the Awami League won the election, but the party not ready to form government with him. So this led to the issue. And the Zulfiqar Ali Bhutto party, who emerged as a winner in the Western Pakistan, was not ready to form a government with the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And in 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested and a reign of terror was started after that. And a lot of Bengali Muslims were killed in that, and these issues led to the liberation liberation demand of Eastern Pakistan. So these Eastern Pakistan demand of liberation, Pakistan got a support of US and China, and India supported these Eastern Pakistan region for their independence. We can say that during Indira Gandhi was a prime minister at that time, and a lot of our Indian army sent there, and it's called Vijay episode, because India tried to overcome, and India successfully expelled these with, and 90,000 army surrendered, and Dhaka was surrounded from three sides. This led to the army surrender, and India and Bangladesh become a free country, and India declared ceasefire, and later on Shimla agreement between the Bhutto and Indira Gandhi was happened in 1972, and this led to the independent country Bangladesh. This Bangladesh issue was started because the Bengali Muslim living in the Eastern Pakistan were treated as a secondary citizenship or secondary citizen, and and imposition of Urdu language was also an issue that led to the agitation against this Western Pakistan. So this is how Bangladesh War of Independence happened in 1971. Now let's come to the next topic, India's nuclear policy and program. So India, as a cult of Gandhi, the nation of Gandhi, was never wanted a military state or a nuclear weapon. Even Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was totally against a nuclear weapon. He even called for a comprehensive nuclear disarmament. But this situation changed when China experimented nuclear test in 1964. So India's journey of nuclear weapon was started with the Homi J. Bhabha, one of the very prominent scientists at that time. So later on, when China conducted nuclear test in 1964, so these five permanent member we called UK, US, France, China, and USSR. This imposing the Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) in short form on the rest of the world, and India calling it discriminatory and refused to sign, because this Non-Proliferation Treaty imposing other country to for disarmament and not conducting any nuclear test. So India totally against it, and India conducted its successful nuclear test in during the Indira Gandhi tenure. So this is how India became one of the nuclear weapon holding country. But India always say in its nuclear doctrine that India was totally against its first use, and India says that no first use of nuclear weapon. India conducted nuclear weapon tests only for its safety and for civilian use, for energy production or another use, or in military purpose it not going to be used in first go. So this is how India became a nuclear weapon country. And India's when nuclear weapon was started or conducted, it also called a peaceful expulsion, because it had no plan to use it against any country in first go. And when these nuclear policy or this nuclear weapon was tested, a lot of other issues was also going on. We in Arab Israel wars of 1973, oil shock because of these Gulf War, and high inflation, all these things was also emerged at the time. So these are the things that started and happened during this period. And now let's come to these MCQ question. These are the MCQ question I have framed, and some of the PYQs previous year question was also in this. So you solve this question so that you get some of the ideas how question are going to come in the examination. So solve this MCQ, and you can also use your reference book for further understanding. So this is all from my side.